Lovely to be here and to be able to hopefully share some experiences from professional qualification of debt advisors in Ireland. So I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes or so, and hopefully there'll be some time then for questions and answers. And as you can see, I'm an independent social researcher and research associate of Maynooth University here in Ireland. And I've also been heavily involved with the money advice and budgeting service here in Ireland, initially as an advisor or a debt counsellor myself, then as a trainer and a support to debt counsellors and money advisors in MABS, and lastly as a research and policy analyst. So I'm sort of presenting with that sort of background to you today. Okay, let's hope this works. There we go. I hope you can see that okay. Can people see that, Dita? Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. So just a little note on the background first. The Irish Money Advice and Budgeting Service, which is a publicly funded service, was piloted in 1992. It's a national network of centres supported by a helpline and some other support services, and there's around 250 frontline staff around the country. And there's been a MABS training unit in place since 1996. Okay, so that's some 16 years ago, 17 years ago. And that provides a range of non-accredited training courses, which are based on the sort of attributes, skills and knowledge we require of money advisors or debt counsellors here in Ireland. I'll talk about those in a second. Part of the background for the development of our programme in Ireland were increasing demands from money advisors themselves for accreditation. People wanted to actually be accredited, so it was very much a sort of from the ground up sort of development initially. But there was also increasing competition from other players in the field, accredited financial advisors and personal insolvency practitioners. So there was sort of a growing, if you like, requirement for accreditation more generally in the personal finance area. So that's part of the background to the development of the programme I'll be sharing with you today. And the context really are the sort of attributes and skills and knowledge that we require of money advisors, or what it means to be a MABS money advisor in Ireland. These are informed by European best practice and our experience over time. Okay, so our experience over at this stage is 30 years, but at the stage we were developing the programme, it was around 20 years or so. And the sort of attributes or approach we require from money advisors are things like being non-judgmental, empathy, putting yourself, if you like, in the client's shoes and trying to see things from their perspective, empowering clients and being respectful to them. In addition, money advisors require a lot of skills. They require interviewing skills, counselling type skills in some cases, communication skills, both in terms of verbal and non-verbal communication, and advocacy skills across a range of different types of advocacy. And money advisors also require a considerable amount of knowledge in terms of legal rights and processes and welfare entitlements and many other things as well. So that's the sort of context, if you like, the attributes and the skills and knowledge in general we require of MABS money advisors. So in terms of the development of the programme itself, which is referred to as the Advanced Diploma in Money Advice Practice, we began about 12 or 13 years ago by forming a steering group of stakeholders who drew up, if you like, a wish list of what we wanted in the programme, and we put that out to tender so people could actually tender to provide the accreditation. And that attracted third level universities and institutes of technology throughout Ireland. And the contract was eventually awarded to Ulster University, which is a university based in Northern Ireland. The qualification, the Advanced Diploma in Money Advice Practice, we set it at level 7 of the National Qualifications Framework, which is if you like, ordinary bachelor degree level. Okay, so non-honours degree level, but a very high level And I think level 7 of our national qualifications framework broadly equates to a similar level on the European qualifications framework as well. The advanced diploma, was publicly funded by the MABS funding body, which is a statutory body, the Citizens Information Board, and participants in the programme were both funded and supported by their respective MABS companies. Okay, so no participant actually paid for the programme. The services themselves funded the participants to undertake the programme. But they're also supported by these companies in terms of giving people study leave, time to study in order to become accredited. And the programme was open to all frontline staff. Some were very experienced, some were very new. Some advisors had left school maybe at 18, some perhaps a little earlier. Others had completed degrees and in some cases master's degrees. So there's a broad range of qualifications that we needed to recognise. And the programme was independently evaluated at its conclusion. So in terms of the method of delivery, there were a total of 7 modules over an 18-month period, followed by a graduation in person at Ulster University ceremony. We pursued what we refer to as a blended learning type programme, which means a mixture of in-person attended sessions and also remote, virtual, or if you like, at-home study as well. And we took very much an adult education focus. So adults, tend to learn by discussion, sharing experiences, as well as obviously being provided with particular information and knowledge. So the programme began with an induction on site at Ulster University, a 2-day residential session where participants basically learned how to learn and to study. They were introduced to the academic way, if you like, of learning and accreditation, how to reference materials and so on. And the main resource for each module, and as I say, there were 7 modules, was what we referred to as a learner primer. And this was, if you like, a sort of a fairly big document that was a guide to the particular module and contained a lot of the references that we'd be drawing on in that particular module. And it was often referred to as the Bible for the particular module in question, a resource, if you like, to the students, very important one. And that was provided to the students right at the outset, and then after they'd had maybe a week or two to actually read it and see what was in it, we held a workshop, a 2-day workshop. All the workshops were held here in Dublin, in the capital. It was generally considered to be the easiest place to access for most people. And it was held in a 3rd level institution here in Dublin, a teacher training college. And the tutor for each module was a subject matter expert with both theoretical and applied experience of the relevant topic. Okay, so we felt it was very important that the tutors would, be able to relate to the students, both in terms of theory, but also in terms of helping them to apply that theory. After the workshop, a few weeks later, there would be an action learning set or a series of what we referred to as action learning sets. These were subgroups which met at regional level. So if there were 25 students in that particular programme that year, we might split them up into groups of 5, and they would meet once in their region and talk about issues arising from the course, from the module, maybe in relation to the assessments or any issues that were arising in their work at the time. So very much a peer support sort of idea. And each module was assessed and assessed in 4 parts. This generally consisted of a sort of a case file where students were invited or asked to apply the theory that they were learning in a particular module to an actual case of their own, or perhaps a case of their service. Then there was an assignment, which was a sort of a discussion-based essay to demonstrate the students' understanding of the particular concepts and ideas we were talking about in the module. And in some cases, there was sort of an online test, particularly for some of the more legalistic or legal type modules. I'll talk about those in a second. The third dimension to the assessment was a workbook where there were short practical questions, maybe 5 or 6 questions, where we asked the students for focused responses on particular questions or issues arising in that particular module. And finally, for each module, students had to complete what we called a reflective journal, which enabled them to reinforce the learning and the sort of issues that were coming up for them, and again could be used as a resource, going forward. Maybe even for other modules, they could look back and see, what they'd learned, where the problems were, perhaps in that particular module, or the good things as well. So to enable them to reflect on their studies and the process of studying. So in terms of implementation, we took very much a practice-based approach. We combined practice with theory. So students were introduced not to the what of money advice or debt counselling, but the how money advice or debt counselling is practiced in the field, and also the why things are done in particular ways. What is the reason for that? And as I say, peer learning was a very important part of the course, discussion and debate and the sharing of experience. And we felt this was key to enable the students to be able to bond together as a group, and also to have a network, because a lot of students were coming from different parts of the country and meeting perhaps for the first time. The programme ran from 2013 to 2019. We had 6 separate cohorts of students during that period, and 136 MABS staff in total completed the programme. So it was roughly over half of the staff that were there at that particular time. There were 7 modules, and I have just mentioned them here in the slide, but I'm going to go through them very briefly one by one in the concluding part of this presentation. But just to say, the order of the modules was very important. In Ireland, we take very much what we refer to as a rights-based approach, which involves checking that the debts that clients present with are actually owed, that they are liable for those debts are enforceable, and that due process has been followed. But the other aspect to a rights-based approach is what we refer to as the policy dimension. So the importance not just of dealing with clients as a series of individuals, but trying to collate, trying to gather the learning from those clients and working with those clients to try and bring about policy change that will benefit everybody, including people who may use the service into the future. So the order of the modules was very important. And with that in mind, we began with module 1, which we refer to as social development and the money advice process. The rationale for that model was to explain the social and economic background and context within which money advice has developed. So at the time we began this programme in 2012, Ireland was still in a bailout programme as a result of the consequences of the global financial crisis. And we'd had a big mortgage arrears crisis, and in fact, we're still experiencing one. So we wanted to place, if you like, money advice and best practice in money advice in the context of those broader societal developments, and particularly the credit boom that predated the global financial crisis, and indeed the crash and the arrears and financial difficulties which many experienced after 2008. And the aim of that module was to provide participants with the knowledge and understanding of social development and policy in relation to over-indebtedness and money advice, both nationally and internationally. So we were encouraging students there to reflect on how over-indebtedness relates to things like poverty, deprivation, financial exclusion, inequality, and issues like that. And also to look at other money advice models and ways of doing things, let's say in other parts of Europe, for example. And a second aim was to provide the participants with a fundamental knowledge of the best practice money advice process. So we wanted participants to understand how the money advice process works and its various stages. So in summary, the module was designed for MABS money advisors, focused on the background to money advice development and the principal processes and ethical issues involved in the delivery of money advice. So it was very much to contextualise and set the scene for the more detailed technical modules which would follow. Module 2 we referred to as money advice and the law. And again, there was a large element of context about this. And the rationale is MABS operates a rights-based approach, which I talked about before, to money advice. And in that context, it is essential that money advisors understand the Irish legal system and the rights that it bestows on both debtors and creditors. So while we want to look at things from the debtor perspective, it's also very important to understand how that system works from a creditor perspective. And in Ireland, the legal system for debt recovery, debt enforcement, is very much a creditor-driven process. So it's very important for money advisors to understand that. The second part of the rationale was the ability to accurately interpret and effectively explain the relevant aspects of the Irish legal system to clients. So the aim here was to enable students and participants in the programme to understand how the Irish legal system as a whole works. So it was, if you like, very much a context to the legal system in Ireland. And the aim was to provide participants with the requisite knowledge, understanding of the Irish legal system, how Irish law is made, okay, how law is enacted, how it is interpreted by judges and so on, and the structures underpinning the legal system relevant to money advice and debt recovery. So part of this module was to explain how the courts system in Ireland works, how the various courts deal with different amounts of debt and the different processes involved in general in the Irish legal system. So very much in summary, this module aimed to provide an introduction to areas of Irish law as they pertain to MABS money advisors. And as I say, the themes examined were the basis of Irish law, the judicial system in Ireland, the courts structure in Ireland, and the legal processes as they relate to debt and debt recovery in general. So this was the first law module, money advice and the law, and there's a second one, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. The third module is entitled Money Advice and Housing and Accommodation. And as I mentioned, in Ireland, we'd gone through the global financial crisis had resulted in a large-scale mortgage arrears problem in particular. So there was the context at the time when we began delivering these modules was an awful lot of households were in difficulty with mortgage arrears. Around about 142,000 accounts were in arrears in 2013, for example, so a huge amount. So the rationale is a significant amount of an individual debt problem relates to housing and accommodation, particularly in a mortgage situation. And it is therefore essential that money advisors have the competencies to support clients with regard to dealing with arrears, evictions and repossessions. Okay, so although we were focusing to a large degree on mortgages, clients also have problems with tenancy issues, with local authority housing, rented situations, with privately rented situations where people can face eviction and arrears and various problems. So we took quite a broad approach to this particular module, looking at all aspects of, if you like, housing, tenure or accommodation. And the aim of the module was to provide participants with the knowledge, skills and understanding of housing and accommodation rights in Ireland in the context of personal debt management. Okay, so again, a very broad sort of definition of accommodation, looking at tenancy, owner occupation and so on. So the module examined key legislation and legal precedent in relation to housing and accommodation, both mortgaged and rental. So looking again at the legislation and at how that legislation had been interpreted. And in summary, the module aimed to provide MABS money advisors with the competencies they need to support clients in dealing with housing, accommodation arrears and the possible consequences of those in terms of eviction and possible repossession. Okay, so we thought very, very important in many debt problems, the key issue is the roof over a family's head. So we had a very specific and focused module on housing and accommodation for that reason. It's a priority debt, and in many cases the most important and pressing debt that people present to MABS services with. In Module 4, we looked at, if you like, the other side of the coin to the debt problem and the income side of the coin, and this module was entitled Money Advice and Income Maximisation. The rationale here is that many MABS clients are in a situation where their expenses exceed their income. Okay, so when they present to MABS, there's a deficit situation in their family or household budget. So it is essential that money advisors support clients in gaining as much income as possible within the constraints of their current circumstances. So every client is different, and for some clients their income will be mainly a social welfare income. Others might be on the minimum wage, others might be on a higher wage, but have an awful lot of commitments, relative to that higher income. So we're basically looking at income maximisation very much from the individual client perspective. And the aim was to provide participants with the knowledge and skills required for assisting clients in maximising their income as part of the money advice process. And maximising income could be through a once-off payment, perhaps a once-off entitlement or social welfare payment, or it could be an ongoing payment, an ongoing weekly or monthly payment. So again, maximising income can be either once-off or an ongoing sort of benefit to the particular client in question. So this module focused on a wide range of income maximisation opportunities, including state benefits, entitlements, tax credits, grants, employment support and schemes under relevant legislation. And in some cases it was about helping people to look at employment opportunities and maybe avail of schemes and programs that could help them to maximise income in a longer term, with a longer term in mind. So again, the module, a quick summary there, providing students who are MABS money advisors with the knowledge and skills required to assist clients to gain as much income as possible within the constraints of their current circumstances. And again, a very broad sort of definition of income maximisation used here. The second legal module then, Module 5, Money Advice and the Law. Again, this idea that the work of MABS is underpinned by a rights-based approach, and it is essential that money advisors have a thorough understanding of the legislation and the rights that legislation bestows upon them. So this particular module drills down, it's more in-depth than the previous legal module, and it focuses very much on consumer credit, on debt enforcement, and personal insolvency legislation, again from a client perspective. Okay, so taking, if you like, the more general things students were learning in the first law module and looking at it now very much in detail in terms of consumer credit, debt enforcement and personal insolvency. So the aim was to provide the students with an understanding of the debt recovery and enforcement processes in the Irish legal system. Many of those processes are quite old at this stage. In fact, some of our legislation still dates back to 1926 and to 1940, albeit it's been updated to some degree since. But it's very much, as I mentioned before, a creditor-driven process, and we focus very much on encouraging students to engage with that and understand that. So again, we're focused on the rights of both creditors and debtors and how money advisors can most appropriately assist clients within this context. And the issue of boundaries was important here because money advisors or debt counsellors are not lawyers by and large, and they don't have the rights of audience in court that a solicitor or a barrister would or a lawyer would. So it was important to look at how money advisors can appropriately assist clients within that context and be a support to clients, even though in many cases they don't have, as I say, the right of audience in a court of law unless invited to address the court by the particular judge in question. So this module again builds on some of the key concepts introduced in the previous module, the previous legal module, focusing very much on consumer credit, debt enforcement and personal insolvency. The sixth and penultimate module was looking more at money management and education. And the rationale here was to provide students with knowledge, understanding and skills required to design, develop and deliver money management education initiatives to various groups within communities based on this idea of empowerment. Okay, so this is very much a prevention type or a prevention focused module, looking at how we can work, or students and MABS advisors can work with groups in their communities And the focus very much here was on more marginalised groups, such as lone parents or people who are unemployed, those who are ill or unable to work. So very much focusing on community and groups of people who are more at risk of over-indebtedness, and we know who those groups are by and large from much of the research that has been undertaken. So the aim was to enable students to design and deliver money management education sessions to a variety of community groups to assess the learning, evaluate the feedback and plan improvements. Okay, so this was very much focused on enabling students not just to design and deliver programs, but also to evaluate them, to make changes where necessary and improvements for the future. So again, you have a summary there. This module is designed for MABS money advisors, focused on empowering communities through money management education. Its themes include working with groups and designing and using money management education materials for use, as I say, generally in the more marginalised communities across and within Ireland. And the final module we called client support and money advice. And the aim here was to bring things back, if you like, to module 1, which you remember was around social development and social policy and money advice. So the rationale here is the role of the money advisor is to provide advice to clients about the full range of options available to them for resolving their debt problems according to their individual circumstances and capacity, and thereby enable clients to make informed choices. Okay, so the aim here is very much to provide clients with advice, but that advice is advice on options. Okay, so the whole aim is that people can hear about the options, they can hear about the consequences of doing certain things or not doing certain things, and make their own decisions for themselves. So it's very much around empowerment. And every individual is different. Some clients have greater capacity and ability to do things than others. So it's recognizing that and working with the client given their own particular circumstances and capacity. So this particular module focuses on the principles and processes which underlie various models of client support. Okay, so we're very much looking here at the different types of support that can be provided. Some clients, the most appropriate support might be self-advocacy, helping them to advocate for themselves. In other cases where clients maybe have less ability or capacity or are under greater stress or strain, they may require more representative advocacy, the money advisor to speak on their behalf. And in some cases, it may be more of a partnership or mutual sort of working arrangement through coaching. So the aim of this final module was to critically analyse client support, if you like, from what we call a macro level. So that's looking at the structures, the different types of models and the various ways of funding money advice and debt counselling throughout Europe. And we wanted obviously to contrast the Irish model with those, so students could see the distinctive features, if you like, of our particular model as it had developed over time. And we were also looking at a micro level at issues around human rights, the need for advocacy and the different types of advocacy, and also the importance of empowerment. So the module had 3 main themes, the core principles and processes underlying these various models of client support, principles such as being non-judgmental, human rights, and the sort of things I've been talking about before. The key components of effective client support in a money advice context. Okay, so this is things like mutual working, partnership working, going at the client's pace, building confidence, things like that. And understanding the process involved in developing effective client support strategies with clients. So this will be, as I say, whether or not a client requires somebody to advocate on their behalf, or whether supporting them to advocate for themselves is a more appropriate intervention. And at the core of this often was the idea of maybe people at the start of engagement with the money advice process may require a lot of support and representation, but the aim during the process is to work more in partnership so that as the process carries through, at the end of it, clients will be much more able, we hope, to deal with things for themselves and to have that confidence and knowledge to do so. So the conclusions and reflections, this is the final slide, just finishing here. The programme was evaluated after its conclusion. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive from the participants, very much so, in fact. The assessments were considered to be tough, very tough in some cases, but generally I think appropriate. Most students recognised that it was appropriate to the level at which the course was set, which was level 7. And indeed, many wished to have a follow-on, some form of continuous professional development. That's what CPD stands for. And in some cases, even academic progression. People expressed a wish to maybe undertake an honours degree or even a master's degree course going forward. But unfortunately, the funding ceased in 2019, alas, so the programme hasn't run since then. Just a few concluding thoughts. Programme development benefits from a champion or champions, and in Ireland we had several of these, including the training and development manager for the MABS support company, MABS Development, called Patrick Power. Patrick was a huge influence on this programme. There's a lot of work involved in terms of getting the accreditation process through the various hoops that it needs, through which it needs to jump. So champion or champions is very important, I think, as is the involvement of stakeholders, both in terms of planning and indeed funding and support. You know, the stakeholders need to be supportive of money advisors, to give them time and space to be able to undertake their studies and, you know, become accredited in this way. The programme provided a frame, I think, for the development of MABS leaders. Many of our regional managers and support staff undertook the programme, and indeed someone lectured on the programme as well, or tutored on the programme. So I think very important aspect was this framework it provided for the development of MABS leaders going forward. And it's undoubted from the evaluation that the programme led to improved confidence, competence and practice across MABS as a whole. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got a general sense of the programme from my input there. And it's over to you now for any questions or observations you may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank